The Baal Shemtov taught all of the Chassidim that everything is by divine providence, and that God can change things at any moment because the world is continuously created by God, and everything in the world has divinity in it that creates it. And this is in stark contrast to Maimonides, who writes in several places that he believes that the world was created entirely for its duration at the moment of creation, and that God had accounted for all of the miraculous events that would take place later, that this was part of the system of creation. According to Hasidism, there is continuous creation. Even though God created everything at the first instant, nonetheless, the world could cease to exist at any moment. And in order for it to continue to exist, God has to want to create it, and creates it by virtue of the divine letters that come from the Torah. Everything in the world is created by these divine letters. These divine letters come from the Torah, as mentioned, and the Torah is called the wisdom of God, the will and the wisdom of God. And if you were to then take this to its logical conclusion, then what are the divine letters that exist within everything in creation? They are God's wisdom. In other words, there is a wisdom in every tiny subatomic particle. God's wisdom is there because it is created by the letters of the Torah, which is God's wisdom. So there is wisdom, knowledge, at the very core of existence. And this is something that I came upon as a principle of existence 35, 40 years ago. Today there's a book recently published by GERALD, a brilliant scientist and religious teacher out of Jerusalem. And he says as much, that there exists within the world, in every phase of the world, wisdom, knowledge. And that's the only way to explain how all the things that happen in this world actually take place. Many of you have wondered why I reject evolution. After all, is not the evolutionary record sufficient? And the answer to that is I reject evolution as a happenstance occurrence, as something that takes place in and of itself. And this is a mathematical impossibility. This is a statistical impossibility. Schroeder touches on that there are just too many parts to a DNA molecule that require alteration in order for there to be the development of another limb, let alone another species. And the reason why the DNA is so similar between all physical things is because they all come from the wisdom of God and are developed as such. They flow from God's wisdom into the various levels of existence, and God doesn't have to repeat wisdom. The wisdom goes on by itself. And this is seen by the story of the trees. God said, let there be fruit trees bearing fruit. Rashi says, fruit trees means that the tree itself should be fruit. The tree is a fruit. That the taste of the tree is like the taste of its own fruit. Well, the tree didn't do that. And when asked, some rabbi said it was just a dumb tree. But it wasn't a dumb tree. In my opinion, the statement of God created an angel. An angel is an intellectual system, a system of wisdom. whose job it is to actualize the will of God. And the will of God was stated, let there be a fruit tree bearing fruit. And this could be interpreted in two ways. One, that the tree itself should be fruit, or that this should be a fruit-bearing tree that will have fruit that will have its seed to be able to reproduce. Since you could interpret the words of God either way, the wisdom, the system of wisdom, decided to take the easy way out, which is to create a tree whose wood would not be fruit. Because, can you imagine what would happen to a tree that tasted like an apple? You'd have all the squirrels in the neighborhood eating it till it was completely devoured. And so therefore, in order to preserve the survival of the tree, the angel, meaning the intellectual system that is charged with developing the tree, decided to go in that route. But the truth is that God can do anything, can provide for any contingency. And that if God says there could be a tree that's fruit, then this tree can survive, even if it tastes like fruit. For example, it develops a horny exterior that doesn't allow anybody to get into the tree itself. Or it grows so fast when anybody bites into it that it automatically will overcompensate for any kind of loss it might have by animals eating it. But there are many different ways that God can provide for the system that God has put in. And the problem with the angel was that the angel is narrow-focused. The angel can only see one thing at a time. But a human being sees not only one thing, but sees peripherally, sees the other options. And that's the difference between man and the angels. We, Jews, see God creating a world, and that the world has many options. And some people opt just to take the easy route, take the route that gives them pleasure. But we Jews see that pleasure by itself is not the ultimate end. The ultimate end is to understand that within every physical thing is the power that God has within it, the wisdom that God has set into motion that creates existence. And this idea of a divine wisdom being the core of all existence actually is the opinion of many scientists. Although they don't call it a divine wisdom, they call it information. Information creates reality. The divine wisdom creates the reality. And that's the reason why there can be so many diverse existences, because the divine wisdom wants there to be these diverse existences and causes them to emerge. Not spontaneous macroevolution. And that's why I believe that God created this world and continues to create this world, not having left the world unto its own, but rather God is involved at every moment. Every moment. The reason why you look at the video is to become aware that God is here and that we have the option, the opportunity to serve and to recognize this wisdom.